Okay, so you want to learn how to start using blueprints and making things do what you want within your scene. So I have a simple example I'm going to go through today. We're going to spawn in a light source and then control that light source in different ways to kind of just get you introduced into the various nodes within the blueprint editor. So here in this little simple level I have set up, I've spawned in a sphere and just made it green. I'm going to use this green sphere to get the world location, which you can see right here is -10, 470, 40. And we're going to need that information because that's where I want to spawn my light source into the world. Now we could, of course, just come up and go to light and get a point light and then move it into the position that we want. And there is your light source. But now we want to control this through blueprints so that you understand how to do this on the fly at runtime. So for now, we're going to delete that. I'm also going to go into my green sphere and I'm going to scroll down until I see actor hidden in game. And we're going to turn that off. So when we actually hit play, the sphere will disappear because we don't want to see the sphere. We're just using the location data. All right, so let's get that blueprint made. Let's come down to the content drawer. We're going to right click, make a blueprint class. And then within here, you have several different options. Plus you can search for tons of other ones as well. For today, we're just going to make an actor, which is the most basic version of a blueprint. It's just an empty actor that you can put some code in to make it do stuff. I'm going to name this light controller. Now let's go ahead and open that up. I'm going to drag it up here so it'll be full screen. And this is what you're going to see when you open up your blueprint. This is the viewport. And basically here we can add objects if we want. So we could add a cube, just for example. And that's what you'll see when you drag it into the level. Just like this, if you drag it in, now you can see that cube's there. Now for today's example, we don't want any actors on this. We're just using this strictly for code purposes. So I'm going to get rid of that. What we're interested in is coming over to the event graph tab. And this is where we can plug in all of our blueprint code. Now by default, you have a begin play node, an actor begin overlap, and an event tick. Let me give you a quick overview on what these do. So a begin play node is actually the first thing that happens when you hit play. It will run this code one time. Actor begin overlap is for collision detection. So if your actor has a collision, like if we had that cube in here, it would overlap actors in the world. And when it does, it's going to spit out a signal. And then it can also return what actor we've collided with. Event tick is something you want to avoid using unless you specifically need it, because it's going to be more performance intensive. It's going to reduce your frame rate if you're running event tick all the time on a lot of different actors. So we want to make sure we reserve our event tick for very specific things, like if you need something calculated every single frame, then we are going to use it. But if we only need to send out an update every couple seconds, we're not going to need to use that. Although if you absolutely had to, you could just come into event tick and add a delay. And now we can use this delay to say, hey, only send out this signal every 2 seconds. And this is definitely going to save performance. So then the rest of this code that comes after this is only going to happen every 2 seconds rather than every single frame. But still, you should try to get a direct input signal. For example, when you overlap something, that's only when we're going to start sending out signals. It's just more performant so that this doesn't run all the time no matter what's happening in your game. So be careful with event tick. I'll show you more later down the road. For now, we're going to delete everything except begin play. As of right now, we just need begin play. And what I want to do is when the game starts, I want to spawn in this light source at this position in the world. So again, we're going to come over to our green sphere. Make sure we have that location data. Now, before we spawn our light in, we are going to have to make an example actor as well that contains the light. So we can right click, go to blueprint class. We're going to make another actor and we're going to call this one light. So this is our light. And in here, we're going to go to add, and then we're going to make a point light. And that's all we have to do. Now our point light is in this actor. And again, when you drag that in, you can see it is just a light basically within this blueprint. Now do keep in mind, there's a million different ways to do the same thing. So it is entirely up to you to be creative for your specific use case. Today I'm doing a very specific example just to give you a rundown on some basic functions. So let's go back to our light controller. And now what we can do is we can drag off of a begin play node, and we can search for spawn actor from class right here under game. Now this node is very useful for just spawning in actors wherever you need them. So from the class, we're going to select the one we just made. It is called light. This will be whatever you just named your actor. Now the spawn transform, you could plug in another transform, or what I typically like to do is right click and split the struct pin. That's going to break that node down into the individual things within it, because we don't necessarily need to set the rotation for this example. We don't really need to set the scale, although you can. Right here's your controls. If you want it to be a certain size or a certain rotation, you just need to plug something in or manually set these right here. The only thing I'm worried about right now is our location, which we could plug in another actor and just use its location, or we can manually type it in, which is what I'm going to do right here. So we have our green sphere. It's at -10, 470, 40. So -10, and you can use the tab key to switch between these really quickly. And this is really useful. So -10, 470, 40. So now what this is going to do is when we hit play, it's going to run this code to spawn an actor. It's going to spawn our light at this specific location. Down here, there's another setting you can mess with. It's your collision handling. So by default, you can set it to always spawn whether or not it collides with an object, or it can try to adjust the location if it is colliding, but always spawn no matter what. Or you can try to adjust the location, but if it cannot move to a proper location, then it will not spawn at all. And then there's also an option to just not spawn if it's colliding. So for example, if you spawn in a character that can move around like an AI character, you can have it automatically try to adjust the location so it's not overlapping another actor, which is going to save you on weird bugs and stuff like that. For this, we can just leave it on default because we're not worried about collisions. Now, before we run this, we do have to make sure our light controller is added to the level. So drag that blueprint somewhere into your scene. We'll just put it up here out of the way a little bit. So now when we hit play, you'll see our light will spawn exactly where that green sphere was, and then it's exactly what we wanted to happen. So now let's take this a step further. Let's learn about some more things we can do with this light. Back over in the light controller, we can continue off of this code. We can spawn this light, but then right here on the return value, this is the reference to the light that we are spawning. So we can use this to make modifications to that light source. And you can also right click it and promote it to a variable and give it a name, say light reference. And you can see that it automatically sets the variable type to the right one for us. So now later, if we need to use this again, we can just pull it off right here and we can get it or set it. If we get it, we can make changes to it. If we set it, we can change the light reference to a different light. So these are super important with your variables. You can use these anywhere else in your blueprint. So typically if you want to make a change to this light later, you're going to need to make it a variable like this. Now you could come directly off of the light, or we can just come right out of our reference because it's the same object. We're talking about the same object all the way through here. So out of the light reference, let's set the intensity of the light. So you can literally just type set intensity and you'll see point light automatically comes up, and that's what we want. Now you can see it made an extra node here so that it knows we're talking to the point light specifically of that actor reference. Or you could have manually done it yourself, or if you knew exactly what you needed, you could have done it yourself to start with. You could have drug off and said, get point light. And it would be all the way down here at the bottom under variables. The get point light is the point light that is within that actor. So now we know exactly what light we're talking about. We can plug it in to set intensity, connect our execution pins up, try to keep things a little tidy as you go. And now we can easily just set our intensity value right here. So let's just set it to 0.5, for example, and see how much dimmer it is when we hit play. So there you can see now we can barely see it, if at all. But if we come back in and we set it to 1000, we should see the opposite. It is now bright. But if we come in and set it to something insane, like 99999, I don't know how many nines, we can compile that, we can hit play, and now it is literally blinding us the entire scene. So that's how you can change the intensity through blueprints. And now I want to show you another really cool feature we can do with blueprints so that you can make changes more easily to your values. You don't have to come back in and manually type these in every single time all over through the blueprint. We can actually right click on this and promote it to a variable. And now all that did was create a float variable for us. We could have done this manually as well. Let me show you how to do that. So we could have hit the plus sign right here on variables. Let's give it a name. Let's call it light intensity. Hopefully I spelled that right. And we can go here under where it says Boolean. We can change it to any kind of value that we want, including a lot more advanced ones under this stuff down here. But these are typically the most common that you would use. A float is a number, literally any number you can think of with a decimal point included. And if you just want a number with no decimal points, so you can only use like 1, 2, 3, 4, you can't do 1.2 or nothing like that, you could use an integer. So those are the difference between float and integer. Boolean is basically true or false. So if you want to say, if it's true, do this. If it's false, do that. That's how you're going to store that information. A string is just some text that you have typed out, or an object name, for example. You can just use strings to use words, basically. A vector is a location in the world. Rotator is the rotation. And a transform contains an actor's location, rotation, and scale as well. And those are just some of the most common ones that you'll be using. So for example, we're just going to set this to a float so we have more control over it. We can add decimal points. I'm going to delete our new intensity that was created because we don't need it. And now let's say we want to plug this in manually. We're going to drag our light intensity in. We can hit get and then just plug it in. And now we have our values connected. If you hold the control key while dragging this variable in, it will automatically get it, and it will not ask you to get or set. It's just a little shortcut. So hold control and drag, you get it. And if you hold alt and drag, you will set it. So this is a quick way to just automatically do whatever you're trying to do instead of getting that get and set option. So now let me delete that, and let's plug our light intensity up. And now what we can do is actually come down here to our light intensity variable. If you click it, now over here in the details panel, you'll see it says instance editable. You can check this box, and this is all we have to do to be able to control this variable without even opening up this blueprint. And you'll also see that it's connected to this little icon right over here, this little eyeball symbol. So you can actually just turn this on and off right here, which is a faster shortcut. And you can see it's changing along with this check mark over here. So we can just hit the eyeball button, which means it's going to be visible outside of the blueprint to where we can control it. So let's compile that, and I will show you now in our level on our light controller blueprint. If we go to the details panel, the first thing that shows up right here at the top is now our light intensity. So now it's visible outside of the blueprint, and we can just set that value right here. We could set it to 50. We could hit play, and you can see it's kind of dim, but it's still there. So now let's come back out, and very quickly we can go back to our details. We can try a different value. We can try 5,000. Let's hit play. It's a lot brighter. Let's go back out. Let's make it 5, whatever that number is. Let's hit play, and boom, now it's super bright. All right, so now let's get more advanced. Let's go into something else. We've spawned the light. We've changed the brightness. Now let's go ahead and let's change the color of it. So again, you can just come down, get your light reference, and we can search for set color. And you're going to see it automatically knows we're talking about that point light variable. So this is just a shortcut. We don't have to type out point light. It's going to automatically get it for us. I'm going to drag it down here, put this up here, plug it in, just like that. And now we can set our light color. So right here you can see new light color. Let's make it red. Let's hit OK, compile it, and let's hit play. You can see it's not bright enough. So let's change that variable. It's currently at 0, so let's make it 500. Let's hit play, and there's our red light. Now again, remember, you can make this a variable and edit it outside like we did with the float if you didn't want to have to come in and change it every single time. But you can see we just make it green, compile it, hit play. Now we got a green light. So now we've spawned the light. set the intensity of the light, and we've set the color of the light. So now let's go ahead and put a delay node here at the end, just for this simple example. Let's add a delay node, and let's say we want to wait 2 seconds. So we just type in 2 in the duration, and now you could just continue this code out just like this, or if you want to keep things broken up and more organized, we can actually right click, we can type in custom event, and you'll see right here it says add custom event. So we can give this a name. Let's call this move light. Now, what's really cool about this is kind of like a wireless node, basically. So out of the completed the delay, after 2 seconds, we can type move light, now that we've created it. And right here under call function, move light. Now, basically, this will send a signal to our move light, and now this will be called from here. So it's basically a wireless node. So now we can send that signal down to here and keep everything nice and separated. So this is a super useful thing that I use all the time. And this can just really help with your massive spaghetti code. If you get too much in one spot, I think it's a lot easier to break it up into small segments. So we can do this. And now let's say we want to move the light. Let's go ahead and get our light reference. So now from our reference to our light, we can type set world location. And now to set the world location, we have to decide what object are we talking about? Which one do we want to move? So we can move the point light or the default scene root. In this case, we want to use the default scene root because that means it's going to move everything within the actor, not just the point light. So let's select that. It's going to create our extra node here. And now out of the scene root, we are going to set the location. So let's connect this up and let's just set it to... Now, in order to set this location, actually what I'm going to do is I'm also going to come off of this default scene root and I'm going to type get world location. So now we have our starting point location and we want to modify the new location. So the way I'm going to do this, you could just come over here and right click split struct pin, and this gives you direct control and you can plug up your individual values. But there is another way I want to show you. You can drag off and you can type break. And what that'll do is break the vector. So this is basically the same thing, except you get your own little node to work with. And what we can do is actually recombine it and just plug it in there. So for example, we're going to drag off of the X and we're going to make a vector. And now what this allows us to do is keep all of these separate. And let's say the Y, I want to subtract. Let's subtract 100 from our Y axis. And then that's going to get plugged back in just like that. And now this is a good time to talk about reroute nodes. So if you want to move this wire here to where it's not kind of overlapped with everything, we can actually double click it, double left click, and then you'll get this new little node. We can drag it down out of the way, just double click it again, and then put this over here. And now you can see we can actually kind of keep everything more in place where we want it. So that's just a quick way to show you how to reroute your nodes so they don't end up all looking like this. You can kind of organize them a little bit. You can also hold Alt and left click on a wire to disconnect it. So that's a super fast way to disconnect your wires. Control Z to undo, and it's Control Y to redo. So now we've done this, which basically means we've subtracted 100 from our Y axis and kept the X and the Z the same. Now we plug this into our new location. So we're going to take away 100 from our Y axis and set the new location. There's also an option to sweep, which means as it moves to the new location, should it overlap with actors and trigger events, or should it just teleport immediately and avoid all interaction with collision? So let's compile that and let's hit play, and you'll see after 2 seconds, our light's going to move 100 on the Y axis. So now you can see we're starting to get a little custom function going on here. We've set the light to green, we've set the intensity, and we've moved its location. By adding another delay, And let's just say another 2 seconds. And then what we want to do is call this function again, which is called move light, or whatever you named your function. Now, be very careful with doing this, because if you can't see already, we're calling this move light function within the function itself. So this is going to be an infinite loop, which would be a problem if we didn't have this delay node. This delay node slowing it down. Otherwise, if we remove the delay node, this would be calling every single frame nonstop, and it would most likely detect this and just shut down your project. So here, I'll show you real quick. If we hit play, we'll wait 2 seconds, and boom, we got the error for infinite loop detected. So if you get that, don't worry. It's not hard to fix. It's just saying that something is looping every single frame, and it's going to do it infinitely. So you probably don't want that. So in this example, we can just use the delay node to solve this problem. Now, to show you what this is doing, I need to actually extend my wall temporarily. So now if I hit play, we can see the light is moving 100 on the axis every 2 seconds. So now you can see that's how we're getting a custom setup through blueprints happening during gameplay. And now I want to show you another cool node real quick that we can mess with. Let's say before we move the light again, let's say we want to change the color of it. Let's actually just come up here, select all of this. So these 3 little nodes right here, Control C. I'm going to copy them down here, Control V. And then we just plug it up after our delay. And now we can set the color to red. And now you can see what's going to happen is the light's going to move, the light's going to turn red, it's going to move again, it's just going to keep moving as before. But now let's say we want to turn it back to green, right? So there's a really cool node we can use to do this. Let's just kind of put this stuff over here. Let's make a little bit more room. You can drag off the delay and type flip-flop, which is a dumb name, I know, but flip-flop pretty much just means it's going to go A, and then the next time that this runs, it's going to go B. And it just keeps flipping between them, A and then B, A and then B. The first time that this runs, it's going to turn red. But then we can copy this again. We just need the set light color. We don't need the other 2 nodes. Just come off your point light and plug it into the target. Now out of the B, plug it in, and then make sure you reconnect it to your move light. This one, we want to set green, and that's all there is to it. Now let's compile it, hit play, and now it should alternate between green and red. So there it's red, and it's green, red, and then green. And just like that, I mean, you can kind of, this is a pretty good idea to make a stoplight system, huh? So yeah, this was just all for demonstration. I think that's pretty good for this starter video. You've been introduced to all of these nodes here and some useful functions that you can do to make things visible outside of the blueprint. You've learned a little bit about variables. You learned about custom events, which are like wireless nodes. You learned how to set variables and get variables. We talked a little bit about location. We talked about spawning actors in at locations. I showed you the flip-flop node so that it can alternate between different options. So I feel like this is a good little introduction to getting started with code with a very simple demonstration. Moving forward in the next blueprint tutorial, we will expand upon this and get more advanced, and I will probably show you how to do player input so that we can turn the light on and off with a keyboard key to give player control, which means we'll need to set up the player controller, the character, and all that. So that'll be in the next video.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. Leave me a comment, let me know what I can improve on for future tutorials, or ask any questions you may have and maybe we can have the community answer them for you. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell if you want to be notified when I upload new content. And remember guys, the only way to master something is by consistently learning more and more over time, and soon enough, you'll be an expert.